Good morning and welcome to the IBM Watson Marketing Stage. This morning's presentation will be followed by a brief question and answer session. Questions may be entered by going to the Slido link in the Advertising Week app. Select the IBM Watson stage and you may both submit and vote for questions according to the link. And now please welcome to the stage Stephen Wolf.
TV talk show.
Okay. Buenos dias. Is this on? Buenos dias. All right, we need a lot more energy. It's the first day of advertising week. You know, fresh on a plane, coming here, lots of coffee. I hope everyone's excited. I'd love to invite my esteemed panelists to the stage. Let's get Susie Deering, CMO of eBay, Nick Drake, CMO of T-Mobile, Dara Tressiter, CMO of GE Ventures, and the one and only Tarek Hassan, CMO of Petco. Can we give it up for them? Welcome, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So everyone, please take note at Nick's shoes. Can we see your trainers? Can we see your shoes? On brand, magenta.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you all for being here. This is actually probably one of the true treats for me to be in presence of true marketing greatness. All four of you are incredible marketers, incredible leaders. But we have an issue in our industry today where we're trying to balance the balancing act that we have between brand awareness and brand performance. And I would just love to kind of have each of you share a little bit of your experiences that we figure out this balancing act, because the reality is you have to drive growth, you have to drive results. The marketers are required to do so much. I think Terry Kawaja talks about we're really the chief growth officers. But maybe we can start with you, Susie, and to share a little bit about how do you view brand and how do you think about this balancing act?
You know, it's interesting because I think the balancing act has always been there in so many regards. One, it was always, in a career, you would hear people say, hey, I don't want to spend money talking about brand because I want it to all go to sales driving activity. And those two things can't be separated. So I think, as we shared, I feel that brand awareness is truly the way to think about it. But once you start to change the conversation as it relates to really defining what brand is where I think the main conversation starter happens. Because for us, it's about the experience. I always talk to our product team saying, look, you're really the brand. The product experience is truly the brand. I just get the great privilege of being able to talk and showcase what the brand is all about. So I think that if we start to change and shift and start thinking about experiences being more of where that brand comes to life, I think that helps with trying to, again, educate, because I look at my job as a chief growth officer, but I also look at it as a chief educator, because I have to constantly be educating the organization as to what it is that we need to be doing and focused on.
I love that, chief educator. And certainly, Nick, you're going to have a lot of opportunities to educate not just the folks in this room, but the industry, because we have one of the most important tech sea changes happening in 5G. Talk a little bit about how you think about brand and maybe use the 5G as a use case.
It's yeah, that could be a really long answer, so I'll try and distill it down. I'll take the first part, which is at T-Mobile we have a really unique problem, which is we're really 5 years into our current evolution, and it started with our CEO in a moment of rage, standing on a stage in Las Vegas saying he wanted to put an end to a stupid, broken, and arrogant industry. And that set off a course of marketing, which was really about changing the value equation in a very homogenized marketplace. And I think when I came into my role about a year ago, we had to sort of reassess what were the next 5 years going to look like, and how could we change the paradigm, which was beginning to become a little bit of a race to the bottom. It was constant direct-to-consumer advertising. I'm sure you've all seen it and possibly got frustrated by it. And so the role of brand suddenly became incredibly important. How could we reestablish, being an ingredient company, our role in people's lives? And so we've made a concerted effort to begin to become far more human and make the role of wireless far more tangible than it's ever been before. And the reason that that's incredibly important, which you queued up quite nicely, is that what I believe is the most profound technology of our lifetimes is on our doorstep in 5G. And we can probably talk in more depth about what that's really going to mean.
You could just, for the crowd, can you just define 5G? Because
Yeah.
everyone hears all these terms,
Yeah.
but you're the subject matter expert. What is 5G?
I'm not sure I'm the subject matter expert, but I mean, we have incredibly intelligent engineers at T-Mobile that give me this information. But the way that I've distilled it is 4 key benefits. Obviously, it's going to be much faster. So we're projecting nationwide speeds of about 14 times faster, and in specific places, much more than that, in key cities, etc. But that's not really the interesting piece, because most people equate, 3G to 4G to 5G as just a speed thing, and it's not. The next key benefit is the sheer number of things that can be connected to a single piece of spectrum in a single place. So today we talk about the Internet of Things. In a very short period of time, it's going to be the Internet of Everything. And the reason it's going to be the Internet of Everything is that 5G uses incredibly low amounts of power, which simply means that you can put sensors on anything. Imagine every inanimate object having a constant conversation because a sensor will require power once every 10 years. Even our handsets we project may just need recharging once every 3 months or so. So form factor is really going to change. And then the last piece of this is latency, the fourth benefit. So almost zero latency or far reduced latency, which means a ton of exciting benefits. Think, for instance, edge computing happening at home. Every business having edge computing occurring within its retail formats. And that's because of the vast quantity of data that we'll be receiving from all of those sensors placed on almost everything. And then it's the democratization of things like talent. Imagine people who can perform services, a surgeon, for instance, who could get onto a Da Vinci machine in a field in Iowa and perform life-saving surgery halfway across the world because of reduced latency. Obviously, autonomous driving vehicles, et cetera, et cetera. So apologies for the longest answer in the world, but those are the 4 key benefits. And I think the headline is, and what might be interesting for this discussion, is the sheer amount of data that we're all going to have to manage and think about how we deliver benefits to customers via that while considering obviously privacy and the ability to make decisions over what data we use and where is going to become incredibly critical. And I think most people are unaware of how quickly that's going to become imperative in their business.
So that's a deeply impactful issue for every marketer, but also every business. And I'd love to kind of tee it up because you mentioned retail. Tarek, you are the new CMO of Petco. Could we give a round of applause for Tarek, everyone? Welcome on the new role. This is your first official outing as CMO at Petco, right? But you understand data, you understand brand. You've worked on the agency side, you've worked at HP, B of A. When you think about this balancing act, right? Because you obviously need to target your consumers, and you need to understand how to get the message out. And when you hear what's coming with things like 5G, how do you think about this balancing act, especially with this awesome brand that you have now at Petco?
Yeah, well, look, I think the reality is we call it a balancing act because we still don't understand how they all work together. That's our shortcoming as an industry. And I don't think that you've ever been able to create demand without brand value, a brand story, right? And you think about the importance of experience now and the value that brands have to provide back. 65% of customers saying, the loyalty is attached to some sort of value connect. So that's got to be developed through how your brand engages. And to suggest that we do things from a brand perspective that don't create demand, and we do things from a demand perspective that don't impact brand, I think all of us collectively are probably, our heads spin with this debate on a daily basis, and I've kind of decided that debate needs to go away because what you need to actually understand is the journey, which is I think what's changing our business and understanding the distinctions between brick and mortar and the data that we have. And so it's really fingers and feet, right? And how are you managing both of those dimensions of your business and adding value at the right places and understanding what those are. In our world, yeah, I'm fortunate. What's not to love about puppy dogs and kittens, right? So it's you need to add babies and I'm set. So from our perspective, that's really critical though because you are engaging in a lifestyle with folks and members of their family. And so to think you can do that just through sort of functional conversations, you can. It's going to be short last, or you'll play in a very small part of the business. Our game will not be the supplies that we sell. Our game will be how we engage in the daily lives of these pet parents' lives and making sure they have a meaningful experience with those pets and keeping them happy and healthy. So our view is pretty simple. If it's good for the pet, it's good for the parent, it's good for the business.
So I think there's a tweet in there, hashtag fingers and feet. I like that analogy. Dari, you sit in a really cool intersection because at GE Ventures, you invest in a ton of businesses, but also you have this incredible background and pedigree, and you used to be at Apple, driving a lot of their small and medium business. So you've also been a performance marketer, and you talk a lot about this kind of experience ecosystem where there really, because of technology, there is no kind of line between upper and lower funnel. How do you kind of approach it where you are?
Yeah, no, I think everything everyone has said, I think, is just really spot on. And the only thing I would add to that is I really think we're in the age of the conscious consumer. Gone are the days when, as a brand, you don't take a stance, right? The world expects you to take a stance. Hell, Twitter expects you to take a stance. And so brand really reflects culture, and culture reflects brand. So you cannot divorce kind of performance marketing from brand. If anything, I would say instead of having a data swamp, we need to start to prioritize and analyze and utilize that data to better connect with our customer. So how do we figure out the points? I love what you said about the journey. How do we figure out the points using the data that we have to say, where do we surprise and delight our customers, right? Understanding what matters to our customers. What do we choose to talk about? I was in a board meeting the other day talking with a senior person at one of the healthcare companies, and he was saying, our customers want us to talk about everything, but we can't talk about everything. But what we want to do is choose the things that really are authentic to our brand, are in line with our purpose, matter to our customers, our suppliers, our employees, and then figure out how we use our brand to comment or tell that story. And so I think just understanding that brand and culture are intertwined as it is with experience, and figuring out how does that factor into the type of performance marketing initiatives we do is really, I think, where the sort of secret sauce lies.
I think that it's interesting because on that note, when you think about that experience, it's also because we as marketers think always about what we need to be talking about, and the actual reality is that the experience happens. Right? I mean, every single moment there is an interaction at some level with your brand, and most of the time it is when you aren't talking. It's not when the brand is talking. And so I think that's been part of the almost redefining what does brand mean is so critical because it's not advertising.
No.
Everything
Just
that
advertising.
Yes, it's not. That's one part of it.
Well, you are the chief marketing officer, you're not the chief advertising officer.
No, and I think that but I still think our industry and even the way in which we prepare talent coming into the industry is kind of still skewed to this mindset of it happens kind of in these little steps, and that there's this marketing component, and that you then move over to advertising. Whereas in actuality, it's everything that's been set up here. It's the tangible nature of what your brand is. It's the interactions, the good or the bad that consumers are having with your brand. So you've got to think all of that. It's very delicate, not a silver bullet by any means.
I mean, if you think about what both Nick and Dara were talking about, it's the connectivity of those data points and be able to make sense of it. And to Susie, your point, half the time it's even when you engage with them, you may not be talking about yourself. I mean, I think about my old world in financial services. 80% of people who took action in specific content activity we did had nothing to do with financial services, right? To do with other aspects of their life. So can you understand the signals that the customers are giving you through the data, mine those signals, and then engage with them in the areas that they're most interested in? Then you can start to create.
Yeah, but you're hitting on consumer behavior, and I think that's where we get lost in all this conversation about data. It's 2018. You have plenty of data, and now because of 5G, you're going to have probably 100 times more. This is where, even though it's a buzzword, like machine learning, that's where you actually apply it, because there's no way a human can understand all that data, right? You need to understand now the patterns in the data. That's where machine learning comes in. That's where, kind of some of these technologies, but I'm curious, this is kind of like the external audience that you guys have. You also have internal audiences. So how do you think about your CEO, your CFO, your chief product officer? How do you help them understand the balancing act? Because I'm sure, whoever is running sales, they want some field marketing. They want to, hey, I need to drive this quarter. But you over here are also trying to raise awareness. And if people don't understand, kind of the utility, like you're not going to be able to accomplish that goal. So how do you guys think about that? And you obviously have a very outspoken CEO, Nick.
He's very quiet.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I love his Twitter handle.
You know, I got asked the other day, what does this cooking taste like? Has everyone seen Slow Cooker Sunday? John now has a cooking show that he broadcasts live streams that has better ratings than MTV on a Sunday. Yeah, it's quite extraordinary. You know, he's great fun to work with. Well, I think the thing that John brings to the company is completely unafraid to test and iterate. We really jump into innovation. And I was just reflecting on what Susie and Tarek were just saying about bringing experience together with brands and how we began to orchestrate that in T-Mobile and how I needed to bring in some of the members of John's senior leadership team on what we were doing. And it was a bit of a bumpy ride, if I'm candid. I've only been in my role for a year. And as my title indicates, we brought together marketing with experience, digital experience, because just as you were saying, the two have to come from the same place. And of course, to deliver that seamlessly, you need to have insights as the cornerstone of every single team.
Right. And by the way, real insights, because if you could Google it, it's not an insight.
Actionable insights.
Right.
No, absolutely right. There's a big difference between analytics and insights. Yeah. And so that was a key distinction, having insights teams planted with all of our teams. Now, our teams, we had to change the taxonomy, and it's a much overused word, but I needed to demonstrate the power of Agile. Now, I don't necessarily recommend this route. It's the one I chose to take, but I hid in a capital project a brand new space where I ripped out the traditional telecom cubicles. You know, when I looked out of my office windows to my team, I couldn't see my team because they were all sitting in these little boxes, not talking to each other. It was dead quiet on the floor. It's just a miserable experience. Death by cubicle, I called it. And so I hired a unique space, built an agile work environment, made it kind of fun. You know, we had music playing, and we had agile coaches and Kanban boards all over the place, and we trained the team to work in an entirely different way. And then I walked the executives through the floor and said, this is what the entire business needs to look like. This is what digital transformation needs to look. You know, because in digital transformation, primarily many companies focus on technology, and they forget about the people, process, and culture piece. And unless you get that right, nothing's going to happen. And so, brand new work environment, change the taxonomy of the team. Just as we were talking about a few moments ago, we need to think in terms of the way customers interact with the company, not in the way that we are built. And so the taxonomy was built around key customer journeys, with insights teams sitting at the top of those journeys, fueling all of the customer experience changes that we were making, not in, monthly releases, but now on weekly and pushing towards, let's say every couple of days to iterate customer experience real time, and of course empower those teams with their own bespoke budgets built around a broader strategic plan and a sense of the direction that we wanted to move in. So it was a huge cultural change. And once we began to put those in place, then for the CFO or the Chief Product Officer, we needed to create an insights dashboard that showed them how we were making business improvements on a daily basis and not have monthly or quarterly conversations. And then the value exchange became very transparent.
That's awesome. So, you're really talking about bring transparency to this internally, but then when you think about, just think about the ecosystem, all the folks in our industry, all the, kind of vendors that, are always calling on you, Tarek and I were joking about that, just people don't understand your pain, right? They don't understand what it's like to actually be in the role of the marketer because they just think it's easy and, you just do some fluffy brand stuff. That's all you do, right? So, what advice would you actually give to folks to kind of help you better understand how you could do your job easier, how you could actually do the balancing act? And, Dar, you have a portfolio of companies that you've invested in and that you help manage. What would be, a tip that you would have?
I think the thing that whether it's like a startup in China or a startup here in the United States, I think one thing that's consistent is how do I get better insights, not analytics, about what my customer wants. So how am I solving pain points
But
for my
understanding
customers?
behavior, right?
Understanding that behavior. What are the jobs that my customer is trying to do, and how does what I offer play into that? I think that helps to shape things, everything from discerning nascent market signals that can influence product, to understanding how do we change our pricing to make it make more sense for our customers, to thinking about the experience, digital or physical. And so I think that understanding that relationship with the customer is so important. And I think things like blockchain are going to disrupt the industry, because it's going to allow us to get even closer to our customers and give them even more power. And so I think anything that's going to help me get closer to my customer, understand what they're thinking, how they're feeling, how I can better impact their lives, having that customer obsessed, audience first approach will always be helpful to me.
Yeah.
So you have, you're super smart. You've got, the right background. So you're allowed to use the word blockchain. But we've now said AI and blockchain. We're not allowed to say Bitcoin, because then that's buzzword bingo. But Tarek, this is a really important point. Everyone talks about insights, and we spoke about this. You understand like the Quantcast approach about understanding human behavior. We have this behavior graph, but all these folks that are trying to pitch you stuff, like, they don't really understand your pain. And now that you actually have real first-party data, I think this is where marketers are starting to take back control of your customer. And all of you, in some way, shape, or form, have real first-party data. And I'd love for you to talk about, like, how important is that to you, and like, what are you doing to take back more control?
Yeah, look,
of
if
both
we're
sides?
fortunate enough to have the data, I don't call it pain, I call it opportunity. I think what I would say is the biggest thing is don't presume you know the business that we're in. We're not in the retail business. We happen to use a retail channel to engage, but that's not the action where I win with a customer ultimately, right? Again, I go back to understanding what we're developing along the role of services. The role that products play in those services is absolutely critical to what
When you
we
say
do.
service, what
We have vet services, we have grooming services, we have daycare services. The challenge becomes, how do you bring those together and create a unique relationship with the customer, right? And by the way, any of us that aren't heading into some form of membership and subscription type based structure, right, that's based on what? An experience. You don't go into a membership just to get repeat delivery on a product. Right? You go into a membership because there's a value return, there's some benefit that comes back to you through that relationship. And so the presumption, and to answer your question about getting your executives moving forward, live in a category with the lovely title of, retail apocalypse, right? All of a sudden your executives are willing to listen, but we aren't. We don't view it that way. We don't get up every day and just worry about Amazon. We think about how do we actually leverage the benefits of infrastructure being created by Amazon? How do we leverage?
You can't ship a pet, so you got that going for you, right?
Not yet. Not yet. No, but listen, I think the reality is this. The role of the actual physicality of products is only one component of it. The business that we were in is actually engaging with, like I said, engaging in the life stages of that pet and the pet parent, and understanding how we can provide value. The authority, the content, the role that those things play. That is where the real depth of our relationship is going to be engaged, and that's where we'll win. It's not on the next bag of dog food.
Right, but the beauty of it, and I'm going to tee this up for Susie, you're in the business of understanding your customer.
Yeah.
That's ultimately what it is, and I don't think there's a better brand out there than eBay, because you have this multi-sided platform, and you have buyers and sellers.
Yep.
How do you approach providing that experience for your customer?
Well, it's interesting because as that conversation is taking place, I think one of the things for us is separating the data from the customer, meaning not that we have actually in some cases so much information that we become paralyzed in some regards because think about it, as a consumer and as how you act changes so drastically from day to day and moment by moment. And so I think that the part that as we're having this discussion, I go, gosh, the one thing that we have to be careful is that we don't put data as the first way in, that we constantly move and put really that customer, because then the data comes. Like the data starts to, let the data inform the customer. Don't go the other direction. And I think that's the pretty significant shift that we have to make. But, going to the idea of, this buyer and seller, for us, it's so beautiful, and talking about like the fact that it's culture and it's the way in which things are impacting. We see a lot of that happen. We can tell you, I laughed the other day, I was like, Baker Mayfield right now is spiking on trending on eBay. His sales of his jerseys and everything else were going through the roof at the same time as obviously he was about to take the field for the first time. And so just seeing the culture and what's happening in humanity come to life has an impact. All we're there for is to connect those two things to make it magical, right? Now, how do I go take that and let those stories unfold in the right way and authentically unfold, not through manufactured ways? And so even, the recent work that we just put into the market is, the end of the day, what we were suffering from was creating relevance. We knew that we were impacting and touch so many lives every day, but we weren't creating relevance for why. And so now starting to almost open up that story and let that be, and it's not me, again, telling the story, it's automatically what's just happening.
It's organic.
It's organic. I just get to package it and make sure that it makes sense. Now the real tricky part is, where do the rest of those stories unfold, and how do I understand really where that journey and that customer and where they're going? And by the way, be prepared that it's not going to be right all the time. And that, I think, is the other side, is that we're too afraid of the mistake that may be made.
Completely.
I'd be less worried about the mistake that's made and more worried about, did I build enough credibility to overcome the mistake?
Yeah. And this is hitting on a key point where you see, kind of the latest buzzword, the latest shiny object is direct to consumer, right? All D2C. We're now going to hear that ad nauseum over the next 18 months. You heard it here, folks. Folks. But the reality is, each of you are D2C brands in your
That's
own
all I
unique
am.
way. And so, I'm curious, as you kind of see, certainly the Dollar Shave Club in a way, and Warby, like, they get all this coverage, but the reality is you've been figuring out how to connect directly with your consumer, and you're using both tactics that are going to be awareness, upper funnel, as well as tactics that are lower funnel, but you're focused on understanding, kind of that direct-to-consumer relationship. And, I don't know, maybe, Nick, you could talk, because you're interested because you're also a retailer, right? Like, you have, obviously, all these touch points, but, how do you kind of, think about where do you prioritize, kind of when to actually dial it up for awareness, where to dial up for more, DR performance?
Yep. I think Susie hit on it beautifully at the beginning of this conversation. It truly is, as the title infers, a balancing act.